right, so this is the third video under the Proudly series and the 11th on behaviorals. And in this video, I'm going to be talking about the question that specific banks ask, especially kind of closer to the interview release dates, and that is, where does this bank rank for you, right? And this is actually a really, really tricky question that is going to need a lot of kind of thought from yourself before you give a specific answer here, right? So let's just talk about the ideal case scenario, right? Well, the ideal case scenario is that your number one bank asks you, oh, where do we rank? And you feel like you have good traction there, right? So you just tell your number one bank that, hey, you're my number one bank, right? So your number one bank is basically equal to the people that you say is your number one, right? And that's great, right? But honestly, this is relatively rare, right? As you go through the recruiting process, your number one bank might kind of ghost you or kind of have you cut during some point in the process. So right before interviews are released, you might be talking to like five banks, right? If you're doing great, right? Even some folks are talking to three banks, four banks, right? Right before interviews are released. And if any one of those banks asks you, and likely many of them will ask you, where does this bank rank, right? You can either tell them that they're your number one bank, but you can only tell that to one bank because all of these banks actually talk to each other, right? So if we have A, B, C, D, banks, right? If I tell A that you're my number one, well, they're going to go and spread this information to all of the other banks, right? So it's kind of like, yeah, honestly, it's pretty like strange to me, but they do talk to each other, right? So you can't go and tell every single bank that they're your number one bank, right? But let's say that you know when the interview dates are, right? So let's say that you know that Bank A is December 1st, Bank B is December 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th, and so on, right? Well, in this scenario, right, if Bank E asks you, right, where do we rank? Well, you can tell them, and this is truthful, right, that if you folks make me an offer, I will accept it. Right? So you can say, like, if you guys make me an offer, I will accept it. Right? Now, keep in mind, that's also something that you're saying that is binding, right? Now, if they do make you an offer, you are obligated to accept it, right? Um, Now, this is kind of more in relation to if you are at a specific school and you have a relationship with that bank, right? Then in that scenario, your school is going to require that you accept that role, right? And honestly, it's the right thing to do as well, right? If you gave someone your word, you need to fulfill it, regardless of whether you get an offer at a different bank, right? But I mean, you kind of go through this process to make sure that you're you're setting yourself up in the best process, right? So that's something that you can say. You can say that also to the fourth bank and the third bank and the second bank, right? And I mean, obviously, this is kind of hyperbolized in a sense, right? But you can say that because they typically make offers the same day, right? So you can say that to each one of the banks, and that turns out to be completely fine, right? Well, the last scenario is that, well, what if you have a bank that you don't really prefer that's actually first, and then you have your number one bank that's let's say after, right? Well, in this scenario, basically, you need to tell this bank that you still want an offer and you're really, really excited about the opportunity, right? So if this is the scenario for you, then you're going to kind of spin up a little bit of a story, right? So you can say that, oh, I talked to this person, this person, this person, and I really feel strongly about this bank. I would rank it extremely highly. Yeah, so kind of use that language rather than kind of saying that a bank is your number one bank or something like that, right? I have heard that some people say that, oh, it's between your bank and another bank. I've heard people be advised to say that. I personally don't think that that's a good answer. If I was a banker and I heard that, I would basically know that our bank is number two, and I just wouldn't feel great about that. So I would actually prefer saying that, oh, like I feel really strongly about this bank. I'm really passionate about this thing and this thing and this thing, and this person has really looked out for me, and they have gone like so far for me that I really want to be at this bank. Right? At the end of the day, like that is true. All of that is true. You do really want to be at that bank, right? It's just not your number one bank, right? So that's the way that I would kind of go about answering that question. Now, keep in mind, depending on at what point this question is asked, it's going to have a different answer as well. If this is before interviews come out, it can be actually pretty helpful. Telling a bank that they're your number one bank. So if they're on the fence of whether they want to invite you to an interview or not, they're more likely to invite you. Also in the interview process, right? If it's between you and two other people, and you're both recruiting for the same exact seat in the same exact bank, well, telling that bank that, oh, you guys are my number one bank is pretty helpful, right? And kind of makes you stand out. So that's another thing to kind of keep in mind overall. But at the end of the day, you just want to make sure that you are playing this game correctly, right? If you haven't heard from your number one bank for a week and interview invites are coming out in a week's time, and it's been a bit of time, it doesn't make sense for you to email them and tell them that they're your number one bank, because more likely than not you're out of that process, right? So that's the way that I would go about it, and yeah, I hope that's been somewhat helpful in terms of learning how the process works and how the banks kind of talk to each other. So let's hop into the next one.